All right, Blake. So yesterday we were actually recording a show talking about some of the differences between taxes and the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, and how, in essence, both of these actions that are taken are designed to actually pull dollars out of the economy. So there's less dollars floating around, thus bringing inflation down because the true value of the dollar would increase when there's less around, just like with scarcity. So, with that being said, Blake, I wanted to actually extrapolate on this point and actually hear a little bit more about what you have to say between the
Right.
Fed raising rates and the federal government raising taxes. Is this
Okay.
something that we've seen in the past, and how does this correlate to today's economy?
Yeah. Well, like I said yesterday, there's two ways that the economy that you're able to take dollars out of it, right? And the first one is raising taxes, and the second one is raising interest rates and controlling the amount of money in the system through the Federal Reserve. Well, I wanted to read you some stats. So, the vast majority of Americans, this is for the last tax increase that was proposed in 2022. It ultimately didn't work out. But
Yeah.
overall, Americans opposed the new tax plan by a 3-to-1 ratio, 75% to 25%. And then they broke it down into political parties. We know that we have a Democrat president right now. Even the Democrat president, President Biden, right? Even his supporters, 69% of them opposed his new tax plan. Interesting, right? Taxes, are they
Hmm.
popular? No. Obviously, raising taxes is never popular. Doesn't matter what party you are, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Either way, raising taxes is unpopular, and it's not going to win any votes. So I think the sneakier way that the government tries to go through, and I shouldn't say the government, but our governing bodies, the way that
Yeah.
they try to regulate the economy is through the Federal Reserve. But I wanted to read you some stats about what Americans believe about the Federal Reserve System. Okay? So
All right.
one in
We're ready.
five, 21% say that they know nothing at all about the responsibilities of the Federal Reserve, while 33% say they don't know very much, 38% say they know only a little. Guess what the overall number is of people that say that they know a lot about the Fed's responsibilities?
Uh,
7%. 7%. So 93% of Americans, they don't really know what's going on, to be honest with you. And then listen to this, fewer than 1 in 10, so approximately 1 in 10 people correctly identified the Federal Reserve is tasked with maximizing employment, and only 34% correctly identified the Federal Reserve's responsibility to stabilize prices. 52% thought that Congress has to approve an action taken by the Federal Reserve, which we know doesn't happen because the Federal Reserve is completely independent. And 47% believed that the president could dictate what the Federal Reserve did with in regards to interest rates, which is obviously another false stat. So, with that being said, 7% of Americans feel like they know what the Federal Reserve is doing, which is a scary number because if you don't know what's going on, how do you know if it affects you? So
Yeah, yeah. A
basically,
lot of people
yeah,
not able to forecast into the future
yeah,
whatsoever whenever they have no ability to really look at and see what the Federal Reserve is doing. I put those stats on the screen while you were talking, and that's just amazing to me. Only 8% I can identify the Federal Reserve is tasked with
mm,
maximizing employment. But if I'm going to be honest with you, I think I was part of the 92% there. They actually handle a lot of things and a lot of metrics to determine what our best economy looks like, don't they?
yes, they do. And strangely enough, when the numbers came out for the May jobs report a little bit ago, I know we're now on the June jobs report. The May jobs report actually scared the Fed because there were too many jobs in the system, proving that the economy hadn't slowed down at that point to be able to slow down inflation. A lot of people don't realize that inflation is caused by too many dollars chasing too few goods. And so when they see job numbers at a higher rate, they assume that there are still, a decent amount of dollars in the system that are disposable for companies to hire people. So strangely enough, maybe they're not actually caring about that unemployment number,
Yeah,
right?
maximum employment. Yeah.
Maximizing employment because they are actually more concerned about inflation. Either way,
hmm
unemployment or inflation, both of them are going to hurt American consumers. So
Well,
it's a
I think
unique time that we live in.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Inflation, a huge killer of the amount of money coming in. So there could be more jobs, but
Yeah.
a lot of people working almost in vain because they're not able to cover their basic needs because inflation is absolutely killing the overall price of their goods. And just like you said, if they want to tame inflation, unfortunately, they need to have less money bouncing around the economy. Well, how do you do that? By having consumers with less money able to bounce around the economy, or less people with money being able to spend in a very large and vast economy. It's really interesting to see what's going on there. One last question. Do you think that it's more likely that we continue to see interest rates really skyrocket from 7, 8, 9, 10% and beyond? And
Yeah.
if you see that happening, do you also see a tax increase coming in, or will maybe this president or the next president of a different party, probably the Republicans, looking at how things are going, would they actually have to lower taxes to somehow curb this thing from going completely belly up? What do you think?
Well, without getting too into the statistical reasoning behind taxes, there's actually this thing created by an economist, Art Laffer, called the
hmm
Laffer
The
curve,
Laffer curve.
where
Yep.
revenue is maximized at a particular rate, where also at the same time they don't have to continue to raise taxes. So a lot of people think that higher taxes actually means higher revenue to the government. That's not necessarily true because higher taxes kill jobs. Jobs that are killed have less people paying into the tax system. So
Absolutely.
what any political person, or any of our leaders on either side, what they're going to have to do is look at the revenue, look at the Laffer curve, and decide where do we make the most revenue without hurting the economy to a point that we lose taxpayers. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I know that tax hikes were proposed last year in 2022. They weren't
Yeah.
popular, they failed ultimately. However, are we going to see some of the rollbacks from the previous administration? Probably. So we'll see what happens. But ultimately, if taxes raise, interest rates raise, it's still going to hurt the consumer in the long run. So
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be interesting to really see what happens because you can't overtax and then continue to stamp out employment with what the Fed's looking to do. Obviously, they said their main goal is to absolutely get that inflation rate back to the historical 2% average. So we're going to have to see what happens there. Hopefully, the government can figure out what they're doing on their end. I still think it's fascinating that here in the United States that we have a system that's completely detached from the government in a lot of ways. So,
and
yeah,
I'll be
very
honest with
interesting.
you, real quick, one last thing. The only way to stop this is actually to stop the government from printing money. Not saying that we have to stop our operational costs, but every year the budget has increased, and we cannot allow that to continue because ultimately, if you allow more money to be put into the economy through the government, at that point, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you raise rates, you're going to hurt consumers. If you cut rates, you're going to create inflation. So either way, you're hurting consumers.
That's absolutely right. The more you have of something, the less valuable it is. That's what's happening with the dollar every day. Yeah. Blake, thank you so much for breaking this down. I appreciate it. And I'm praying that my taxes don't go up, right?
Yeah. Fingers crossed, but hey, listen, man, they're probably going to go up.
That hurts. Well, thank you, Blake.